Hi, my name is Wendy Artnowski, and I'm going to try to fill up the next 2 hours with useful information that you can use for your ARF or actually for any plane that you're building, any control line airplane that you're building. Basically, the rules don't change because it's an ARF. The rules of flight trim, the rules of construction, the rules of alignment all apply. And before we even go to the video of building a plane, we're going to build one on this video. I want to thank John Brodak and his wife Buzz, who have over the years made an exceptional contribution to the world of control line stunt in many ways. And the ARF, Cardinal, Oriental, and Baby Clown are the latest additions to the things that they've contributed, as well as the Brodak fly-in. But before we even start, a nice thanks to John Brodak and his family. Now, for anyone who might not know, I just thought a minute or so of the history of the Cardinal, since that's the ARF that we're going to be building, would be worth putting up here. The Cardinal itself is a design that evolved from Jim Greenaway's Pattern Master design over the years, starting in '87. Literally hundreds of them have been built, and I've flown many of them. An excellent design in many sizes. Over the years, Big Jim Greenaway has given the world of control line stunt many, many excellent designs. I've evolved from his design several, including the ship that was to become the original Brodak Cardinal, which then became the Cardinal Brodak ARF. It's a long lineage, but it goes back into the, actually into the 70s, from the aerodynamics and the construction techniques of Big Jim Greenaway. Now, over the years, the Cardinal design in several kit forms has gone on to be as high as second place. Here we are at the 91 Nats, and in several other fly-offs for the Walker Cup, and won several concourse awards and a 20-point award, which is probably one of the trophies that I treasure the most. And because of the popularity of the Cardinal design, I wanted to make a version of it, a profile version, that would be very easy to build. In this case, it's the Brodak Cardinal kit. This is the original prototype. That plane went on to be the prototype for the kit that John Brodak has sold, which became the basic design for the Brodak Cardinal ARF. The original plane went on to fly literally thousands of flights. Many, many people got to test fly it before we ever developed the kit. It was actually one of the most popular planes in our Air Force for many, many years. We used it for motor testing. We entered contests with it. We actually flew it at the Brodak fly-in and had several other people fly it. It went on to be quite a popular plane, and from what I understand, it is right now the most popular kit that's available right now in terms of numbers. And actually at the Brodak fly-in, there was a time when a Brodak Cardinal was flying on every fly-in circle, and we have that on one of the videotapes that we shot of the Brodak fly-in. So it's a very popular design, and that's one of the things it has going for it. So when I received my first ARF, I was really excited to open up the box, and I was really impressed with the quality, the attention to detail. I really honestly and truly feel that thanks to John Brodak and the work of several people, including Bob Zambelli, Tom Hampshire, among others, that this is probably the best, most complete ARF available in the world today. And many, many people should be thanked for the development work that they've done to make this happen. And I'm sure this is going to go on to become a leader, no matter how many other ARFs come out. Right now, I've flown them all. This is the one I like the best. You can imagine how prejudiced I am. So let's open a box and see what's inside. Now, the first thing that impressed me about the ARF when I opened the box, because I'm a manufacturer of products, I love to see products that are very professionally prepared. In this case, everything is wrapped in plastic to avoid scratching. These are the wheel pants, and I wanted to look at each piece carefully. Since I manufacture wheel pants, I have a real appreciation of just how nice the workmanship is on that. And that's just one of many things. So what I like to do before I'd even go ahead and build this, I like to take everything out of the box. The wheels, the aluminum landing gear, all the hardware parts are in here, all the push rods, all the pads to mount the motor, again in a nice plastic bag. Directions, and we're going to be using these step by step as we do the construction part of this video. But when we finish building this, I think the biggest help we can do for most people is to show some of the things that'll help you trim and make the maximum performance right there the day you fly the plane the first time, rather than go through weeks and weeks of trimming. If you can get it trimmed right in the beginning, that'll really help. Get it aligned right, get it built. There's only a few hours of building. A couple of evenings is probably realistic. If you look at the fuselage section, and because this is my design, I have to be honest, I really like this design. And because I've built and flown so many of them, I really can appreciate when one flies real well. I like to take full credit for the design. Anyway, we don't want to make this too humorous. But anyway, I want to take all the parts out. Everything comes wrapped in plastic, totally covered, finished. And we're going to go step by step with John's directions. Try to make this as self-explanatory as possible, because there's very little work in assembling this. And it should be either a couple of evenings or a Saturday. But it's worth it to take your time. And then it's worth it to get it as trimmed out as you can before you fly it. Not go out to the field and have it either nose heavy, tail heavy, or whatever. Look how nice some of the parts come. They're basically finished. There's very little work to do. So without further ado, let's get the direction book out. Let's get the parts all laid out on an open table and start construction. So what happens when you lay out all the parts, and what I've done, I've laid them out on my shop floor. It would be very easy if you had a table, a building bench, a kitchen table, or something nice and flat to work on, maybe with a blanket or a padded surface, so you could avoid scratching some of the delicate parts as you assemble it. But the first thing to do is to get the instruction booklet out and read it over carefully before you go any further, in case there's a part of it that you don't understand. And I want to go, before we even start this, I want to go about this in a very logical, methodical way. So let me just put a little storyboard up here, because this is the beauty of what we're doing with ARFs now, is that everybody can get to the flying field in a very, very short amount of time. So before we start construction, let me do what I call one of my little storyboards, and we're going to do more of these later on in the video. Before we dig in, start getting wood and glue on our hands, let's just review this for 1 second. What would be the potential benefits of having ARFs in the sport? Well, the first obvious benefit is very quick from the time you open the box to where you're actually at the flying field, a minimum amount of time. Inexpensive, cost-effective, a very little amount of money for an awful lot of performance. And in the case of the Brodak Cardinal, this is a world-class design. This is a design that's capable of flying at the highest levels, even in the ARF version. Now, this is probably the biggest one. It adds people to our sport. If our sport only had a few people in each town across the country, it'd be very hard to find a flying field. When people get together and you have more and more people, what happens is you have more and more places to fly, more and more political influence to get, keep, and maintain those places, more contests, and you just have a little bit more clout with the local government when they want to take your flying field away, or when you're looking for a place to fly. Several people, like in the case of the clubs I belong to, one of the clubs, the Garden State Circle Burners, we rent and maintain our own property. But to do that, we need more people. We lose people each year due to old age, illness, death. We like to bring new people along. The ARFs are a great way to do it. Now here's the biggest one of all. They fly great. Let me just go on here for 1 second. A lot of people think that because it's an ARF, it's not going to fly well. Well, that's not really true. The ARFs that I've flown, especially the Brodak Cardinal prototype, which virtually everybody on the East Coast has flown that. Several people flew it at the Brodak fly-in. The general comment from most people of all skill levels is that it flew great. And that's something I'm very proud of. ARFs are a fabulous tool for teaching new pilots. Because of all the benefits, all of these benefits up here, it makes it a great learning tool. Now, even the Baby Clown, which is a very inexpensive, simple plane, will do aerobatic maneuvers. In fact, the one Bob Zambelli has does the whole stunt pattern. A great teaching tool. One of the things that I run into pretty much every day, people that are getting back into it, generally people that are my age, I'm 59 years old, and they say, gee, I've been out of control line for so long, now I can buy an ARF and get back to the field, get my hands back into it. Many, many people have come back to the world of control line because they've been able to have an ARF. Now, we always have somebody that seems to have sour grapes over various things in our sport, but I think most people agree. Unless you're unlike everybody else, our modern families, modern lifestyles, what they do, they limit the time that we have. Not everybody has a workshop. Not everybody has, even if they have a workshop, wants to spend 100, 200, or 300 hours building a plane. Some people don't care to compete. Some people want to compete at the highest level. ARFs are a benefit to everybody. Now, I consider myself to be a relatively seasoned flyer, and yet one of the appealing things to me of the ARF is I can keep one in my van, and rather than flying my best contest stunt ship on a very windy day, a day it might rain, or if I want to share that plane with other people who are visiting me, I like having a few ARFs around. In fact, we've always had 1 or 2 in the garage for when people visit our home, and we have that on a regular basis. But I think even people at the highest level of competition can benefit and enjoy the benefits of having an ARF. Now, here's one that probably not everybody has thought through, but in a typical year, I tend to go on 3 or 4 faraway stunt trips, which usually include England, Texas, Pennsylvania, Muncie, various places up in New England and Canada. And what I like to do is I like to fly my plane when I go there. So in the case of going to Texas, rather than having to carry a plane on board the airliner, I'm going to ship an ARF kit to Rich Oliver, the people that I'm staying with, and leave it there. And when I get there, my plane is already there, and I don't have to bring it home. So there's a lot of benefits. And if I go overseas, I will ship an ARF overseas, build it when I get there, which adds no expense, as opposed to the horror of trying to get an airplane on an airliner that has a fuel tank. Believe me, it's a nightmare. But you can ship an ARF, especially one that isn't built yet. You can build it in a few hours when you get there and leave it there and have a plane there forever. So that's another benefit. Now, there are many, many more benefits, and I'm just gonna end it with this because I don't want to take up too much of the video, but I want people to understand the significance of an ARF. It's a whole new level of ship. There are going to be, in fact there already are, dedicated contests for ARFs. They're adding to our sport. They're not taking away in any shape, manner, or form. They have a positive influence on our clubs, individuals. In every way that it can be a benefit, it's a benefit. And I really hope the few people that have bad feelings about ARFs or they haven't thought it through yet would reconsider and try to support the people that are coming back to our event, the new people that are using ARFs, and are even learning the ropes of competition, so that the objective is that our sport can grow and that in the future we'll have many, many more members and that they'll all enjoy what we're doing a lot more than if there were no ARFs. I think the ARFs, in every way that they can be good, are good for our sport. Now, having said that, let's get the direction book out. Let's see if we can get some of this built today. What I thought would be appropriate for this video, we have to assume that some of the people, this is the first plane they've ever built. Some people haven't built a plane in quite a while. Some people don't want to build at all. And that's perfectly okay. There's room for everybody. And some people want to take and make a lot of detail improvements or maybe add trim, recover it. Of course, they're available without covering, in every level in between. But what I want to do with the video is pretty much what John Brodak has laid out in the instruction book. Now, all of the planes and all of the products that John has developed over the years, including the ones that I've helped him with, including Brodak Dope, Air Epoxy Light, the Strega kit, some of the other things, the Brodak Cardinal kit. We try to get this right. But if there's a little problem with one item, first off, you can call me. You can call John. Help is always available. Don't just take a chance. I'm in my shop from 1 to 5, and I'll put my phone number up on the later on in the video. We'll give the information for either emailing me, mailing me, or just simply, there's a lot of ways you can pick up the phone and call me if you have a question before you have a problem. But I think the instructions, like all the kits that I've seen in the past, very, very thorough. And I'm not going to go through them one by one, but I'm going to just show the book and mirror image up some of the little things that are necessary. And I would highly suggest, if you're new to this, read the instructions cover to cover the day before you start building. Get the glue that you'll need, the epoxy, make a list of what you need. Have it all on hand, because it'll go very quickly once you start this. And we're going to do it step by step, exactly as shown in the instructions. Now, I'm sure there are a lot of people that are going to say, I want to improve this, I want to improve that, I want to upgrade this. And sure, that's possible, but we're going to basically try to make exactly a replica of what John has, maybe with very, very few changes, because I want this to represent what the average person that buys an ARF would go back and have this. You would not have $1 million shop. You would not have some of the other things that maybe laser alignment tools or whatever. But if you follow these instructions, and I think they're about as complete and good as all of John's kits are, look at it very carefully. Don't improvise too much, and I pretty much guarantee you when you're done, you'll have something pretty special. Now, that's a little look at the book. We're going to go to step 1, and I'm going to go through. And what I do is I'm going to take the book, and I would suggest everybody do this. Just get a red marker, a pen of some kind. I start at one side, and when I get to the step that I'm doing, and you can see we're on step 2 here already. So let's see what step 1 is. Put a circle around it. Now you know when you're done with step 1, cross it off, and you'll never have a problem. Now, the first thing, a lot of people maybe that have been away from the sport for a long time in the back, they're not familiar with CA. CA is cyanoacrylate. I use 2 different kinds. I use thin and thick. It's good to have a tube of both, and since I sell it in my shop, I always keep a supply on hand. Now, what's real important when you buy CA is my choice is always to get it from Brodak's. However, if there's an emergency on Sunday night and I need to get some, I want to get it from somebody who has a big turnover of glue. Simple reason, all glue, including epoxy, has a shelf life, beyond which it's not as good as when it's fresh. John moves a lot of product, so do I, and I sell an awful lot of glue. So what I have in stock is always fresh. I also do this. I take all the glue that I'm going to use, except for the one I'm actually going to use, and it's nice to have a little, this is a box for an engine cover. This is a great little tip. I keep that in the refrigerator, not the freezer, so that when a customer comes and buys the glue, the refrigeration slows down the aging process, and that glue will last 8 to 10 times longer than if it was just left out in a hot, damp attic or basement. Keep the CA right up until you use it in the refrigerator, not in the freezer, in the refrigerator. That's a great little tip. Now, step one on the instructions is to take a heat gun. I don't have a Monaco heat gun, but a hairdryer will do, and just get all the covering to shrink back down. If you experience a little bubble, you can just put a pinhole in it, get the covering to lay back down. Use your bare hand, or what works real well, this is something that works real well, the tip of the century. This is called microfibers. You can buy this in a car parts store. Microfibers are great for cleaning, polishing, even cleaning your eyeglasses. And on the covering, they make it exceptionally nice and shiny and clean. Good old microfibers. We use those even on the dope finishes. So I've gotten all of the little bubbles that were on there, heat shrunk down. Actually, there weren't many bubbles. There weren't any on this part. But if you do have a bubble, a pinhole in the middle of it to let the air out, just use an ordinary hairdryer or a heat gun. Get all the covering shrunk down before you go to step 2, and that ends step 1. What I do, I'm done with that step. Now I can go on to the next step. This way, if I have a break, or if I don't finish this in one session, I know where I left off, like a bookmark. We go on to step 2. Now, before we go to step 2, we need to have a motor. We need to decide which motor we're going to use. Now, I just wanted to list some of the motors that I have flown this design using these motors. Brodak 40, of course, with the prototype. I've had many, many good flights with a Rojet 40, both their bar stock and the new one that they've just come out with, the Magjet, which is down here. The LA 40 and 46, and it seems like most people, this is the motor of choice for most people that want to compete. Randy Smith's motors, the 36s and 40s, an excellent choice. Double star 40s, excellent. One of the choices that Bob Zambelli and several other people have had with excellent luck, if you like 4-stroke power, the Sato 40 would be my first choice of a 4-stroke. And if you can get nostalgia motors, Super Tiger 46. Several of the original prototypes were done with Tiger 46s. They worked out real well. But here's the bottom line. Virtually all of these motors will be fine. And depending on which one you have or which one you choose to buy, the thing I would try that I would kind of avoid, and I would put these as, these would be marginal. Meaning that, yeah, some people may get them to work, but you may have some difficulty. A Fox 35 is really a motor that's too small for this design. Ones that I've flown with Fox 35s, very marginal. Can still do the pattern, but they're really not at an advantage. I wouldn't put anything bigger than a 46. I wouldn't put a 50 in it. What happens when you put a 50 in it? It gets nose heavy, and then you get into trim issues. So you really do have, or any motor smaller than a 35, a 28, 32, it really would be marginal. Anything bigger than a 46, I think unnecessary. But you've got plenty of good choices. And again, my prototype had pretty much all of these motors in it at one time or another. Every one performed fine. One I would not suggest is the 30 Sato. That's a little bit like the Fox 35, a little bit too small of a motor for this design. But you've got plenty of choices, and the good news is it's not critical. And you can go here from motors that sell for under $100 to ones that sell for around $300. You have a nice variation of motors. They're all excellent. And I would do this: if you buy a motor from Rich Oliver, use his recommended fuel, props. If you buy one from Randy Smith, go with exactly what he tells you to do. A double star, do exactly what Tom Dixon tells you to. A Sato, I would check in with Bob Zambelli for the latest information. Now, every one of these is a good choice. And the reason is it's a good design and it's not critical. And that's the good news. So you have a wide range in price, availability, and really whatever you really want to put in it. So let's go to step 2. I'm going to set this model up to use several power choices, some of which I've just already put on that chart, but one of the ones that we use for other testing, and I just happen to have a nice brand new one here, this is Les Stemit's motor, use this as an example, is we need to do what it says in step 2 and make the clearance in the back. Now for this motor, here's the good news: this motor, there are no clearance issues. On some motors, and if you look at some of them, they have a clearance issue in the back. So to begin with, we've kind of jumped one step, because this motor pretty much fits in right where we wanted it to. And by the way, this is an excellent choice. This is sold by Rich Oliver. It's a Magnum with a Rojet top end on it. It's an excellent little motor. It's very light. I've had these in my twin engine planes, and I have several that are not even used yet. They're all excellent. They run well in profiles. A good choice of motor. We're going to go on to step 3. If you remove some of that material, you want to seal it with CA or epoxy. You want it sealed. You don't want raw wood there. We're done with step 3. The next step, they're suggesting a good way, I think, of it getting the wing into the body. And what we really want to do is measure it carefully. And I have a 48-inch ruler here, but you could use a yardstick or any ruler really. We want to make sure the wing is centered. And I'm measuring right to the drilling edge. It's 23 and a quarter. This way just a little bit. What? Now I'll have to remeasure it. But basically you can slide it back and forth until you're happy with the position. And measure it from both sides. Okay, that's good. Now that I have both sides of this to the trailing edge equal, I'm going to check in here with a 90-degree triangle at the end to make sure I'm not moving this. I want to just lay it out with some thin tape. Leave myself a little bit of wiggle room. Now, once we move this away, we have marked accurately where the fuselage will rest on the wing. And now we're going to move another piece of tape in here, an 1/8 of an inch tape, and then remove the covering right in the middle, so that the covering will go underneath the joint by about an 1/8 of an inch. So now, following John's directions, again, I know I've left that tape outside of the fuselage joint by enough. Then 1/8 of an inch will be fine. Now the idea is when you cut the covering away, you really don't want to, if you possibly can help it, You really don't want to cut down into the wood, so maybe it's a good idea to get a brand new blade, start at the trailing edge, and just get a feel for how much of a cut it's going to take to bring that covering up. And let me just see if I can show this on the camera. Okay, now here's the covering coming up. Okay, if anybody can see that. Now I could run the razor as I'm pulling it up. I just want to score it very carefully. This is probably the most important joint on the whole plane. And if this is a weak joint, you may have problems with vibration, or it'll just fail. In the best of all worlds, we'll get a nice joint on this with epoxy. Again, I'm practicing at the trailing edge because that's where it's the least critical. Up on the high point of the wing, it's critical right here that you don't cut through the wood. So if I go one little bit at a time, but anybody that's a modeler and has some sharp blades around, some XL blades or whatever, I'm trying real careful not to cut down into the wood. Otherwise, if I score this, it would make for a little bit quicker. Probably you'd be thinking, wow, he's good with a razor, but it wouldn't be as good of a joint. And sometimes you can do it this way. The idea is just to get away, get the material out of there, whoops, until we have all that material. Wood, we don't need a smooth edge. The fuselage joint is going to cover that up. Now we have the exact footprint where the glue is going to go when we put the fuselage in place. You can imagine, we're just checking off the steps one by one. The next suggested step is to get, has a protective coating on the control horn. I want to clean that off. Next step might be a little tricky to some people. What we want to do is glue the horn in, but we don't want to attach it to the wing. So we want to make sure that it's parallel to the trailing edge, which it is. And we want to make sure that the flaps are flat. In this case, they're not exactly flat, so we want to just, because these are soft horns, we can just tweak it until it's called a tweak. Very carefully, very gently. Make sure the flaps are both level on the table, that it's level here. Now what John is suggesting in the directions is we're going to put slow drying epoxy in the horn. You could use 5 minute if you like to work quickly. Put some epoxy in the horn, tape this in place, wipe it off with isopropyl alcohol, and we want this to dry. So this is one unit before we go on to the next step. As suggested, you can use isopropyl alcohol to clean off any extra epoxy. Once that, actually you should do it immediately before it sets up. Point 2, you want to sight down the two flaps and see that they're both level at the same time, and if they're not, you can just simply give this the slightest little tweak again. So a lot of times the epoxy fills one side quicker than the other, but you'd like to start off with them that when you look down them, they're perfectly straight if possible. Okay, next thing we have to do is we're going to pull the covering off the back just enough. I want to make a little clearance for the horn, and I need to make a little notch in the back so that the control horn sits right in this gap. You can do that with a razor. You want to make so you have about that much, 45 degrees somewhat, that amount. We also need to remove some material here. This is where our little filleting area is going to go. right now is the time to do that. Easier to do it now. Also, we have to check our hinge slots. Line up all the hinge slots. Take the hinges out of the package. We don't want to have any covering on this. One by one, we want to test fit these hinge pockets. Now, in my case, it was a little difficult trying to get the exact hinge location until I took a razor blade and ran the razor blade down in there. It just didn't slide right in, and I'm sure it's not supposed to, but it's easy if you put a little number 11 blade or a blade down in there. You pretty much can figure out where the hinges go. Now what I want to do is take and run the razor right up into the wing at every location to make sure I have this all the little slots cut at the same time. So once I go to put this together, I don't wind up where this slot is off to one side or the other. Making a mirror image of these slots. The slots are already cut in the wing. Very, very, you have to look carefully to see them, but they're there. And in my case, I needed glasses to see them. So when we put this together, we can just slide those hinges in on both sides. Good idea to dry fit everything. In this case, the slots in the back of the wing are just a little bit bigger than they are in the front. So what we can do is, one by one, just make sure our hinges, which are already glued into the flaps at this point, make sure each one of the slots fit when everything is in alignment, and have a little bit of side play. That's not going to hurt anything, but we want to have all the hinges that we can just press this in place and all the slots are ready. Next step is we're going to cut, as per the directions, cut a little piece out of the back so we can slide the horn back, and we're going to save this piece and of course glue it back in when we're done. Or we could even put a little piece of scrap. I could save that to glue back in. What that's going to allow us to do is have the horn pushed back so that we can get all the hinges in place. And once all the hinges are in place, it'll allow the horn to be in the back. Once we get all the hinges lined up, then we can push it forward. This allows this to slip back, and what that does then is we can start at the root and put each one of the hinges into its slot. Now what maybe you'll have to do here is just give yourself a little extra clearance. Stick a thicker blade, like a number 26 blade, in there. Again, I want to have a little bit of clearance around the hinge. I want the hinge to just slide right in. Isn't that nice? That slides right in now. And I want to work my way down and get all of the hinges so they slide in and slide out. You have one side, all of these hinge pockets a little bit oversized. The horn should line up with the little slot. These should all just press right in. Again, what I found as a little tip is just slit each one of them. The wider blade seems to work well. If you come up where there's a rib, you've got to kind of slice through the rib. Leave the slots plenty big, they'll fill in with the glue when you glue it. There's one that's near a rib, so we're going to have to cut through that. Now, this is why you have this notch in the horn. You need to pull this back, or else you have to make the notch a little bigger. Now the notch, the control horn lines up in that notch, and if you start at the root and work your way to the tip, you have all your hinging done. That I ran tape over the top of the fuselage because it allows me to check the my triangle. Again, I want to check that we're right in the middle, and I've already done that. And that I'm 90-degree hinge line. That looks real good. Now I'm ready to just tack glue this in place. I'm going to use just a couple of drops of thin CA to hold it in place, tack it, and then check that I have a good alignment, that everything is aligned right. Once it's aligned, then I'll run a permanent bead of CA on there. And what I want to do is just have a few drops holding this in place. Get rid of the Q-tips. This is the most important joint on the whole plane, is from the leading edge to here. This should be a really good solid glue joint. Emphasize this again, and this is really a critical thing. This glue joint up here, and what I've done is just filled in all the gaps with thick CA and ran 3 or 4 beads of glue back and forth, checking that I maintained my 90 degrees just like it tells you on the directions. That's a permanent joint now, and we're ready to move on to the next step at last. What happens when something goes together this quickly, you get impatient. At least I do anyway. I mean, we're way more than halfway done with this. About 3/4 of the way done in just a few hours. Just crossing step after step after step off. The directions are excellent, and I think between the directions and the video, there's no way that you will not have any problem putting one of these together and putting it together nice and straight, not having any issues when you get to the field. We have the hinges already glued into the flap. All we have to make sure, and this is a good time to wear rubber gloves, by the way, is that we get a little drop of it down in there, let it wick in, take a Q-tip, get the extra out, and we can just move down to the next hinge, then we'll flip it over and do the bottom. The good thing about the CA, it's capillary, it wicks right in. And since we're going to tape the hinge lines anyway, and I would suggest always that you tape all hinge lines on all your models, just a more efficient way to set up an aeroplane. This has gone together amazingly quickly so far. An excellent trick is while you're waiting for the CA to kick off, just keep moving the controls. This way it doesn't set up solid and glue the flap in place. Or you could use a little kicker if you like. I always prefer not to use kicker if I don't have to. That's given us, we want to have a very free control system. This will be just fine. And it is a good idea to wear rubber gloves while you're using CA or epoxy. I do anyway, I like it. And any CA that drips on the monocoat, of course, you can usually just get a razor and peel it up. But if you can't, usually a heat gun will soften it up. There's other ways to get it off. You see we have a little bit of a drip down here. But right now I'm not going to worry about cosmetic things, because when we're all done, we'll probably decorate it with the decals and go around with the monocoat gun, not the monocoat, the hair dryer, and any bubbles or any little wrinkles, we can get them out. But we do have a nice set of hinges now. That really worked well. I'm going to have the push rod in the top hole. What would happen, you'd probably have a little bit of glue or something in there. Now, if this were to be a tight fit, where it's ultra tight, it wouldn't hurt to just take a number 11 blade and run it through it. That looks like it's a little bit on the tight side. But again, we've been dripping CA on this. We might have gotten some CA worked in there. Again, what we found out the issue here is, and just so you don't get have a little problem, the horns are plated All high quality horns are plated, and so are these push rods. You notice if you buy a control horn and it's not plated, usually a week later it rusts. Well, that's another little quality touch. The only problem with plating is the plating that they use adds a couple of thousandths to makes the hole smaller and the wire bigger. So in this case we lucked out and we know exactly what the problem was or is, and we can slide our little spring retainer back up. Always easier, I think, to do this with a couple little pliers. Now, a lot of people like to take and put a little piece of fuel tubing in here. I don't think that's necessary. I don't think that's going to go anywhere. And we certainly have nice free control. Boy, it doesn't get a lot easier than that. You want to also make sure down here in this notch that you have plenty of clearance, that it isn't hitting there. You usually have to gouge out a little 45-degree angle, which we've done already, but I just want to make sure. No, we're not hitting anything. That's nice and free. As soon as you fly the plane and some oil gets on there, it'll be free. Glue the little fillets on, and we need to make some clearance here for the horn just by cutting away some of the material. You don't want anything rubbing on the horn, adding friction into the control system. And I see what I have up here. I have to get some clearance around the push rod hole. You can see where it's bending. It needs to be just ever so slightly bigger. I don't want to make it any bigger than it has to be, but you don't want any rubbing on the controls. And we'll shake those little parts out of the wing. And now we have full travel. I took the lead outs out of the wing to test the controls. I want to make sure I'm right about in the middle to start with for our trim. And a lot of this information is on other videos that you can buy dedicated to trimming the plane. We're just going to try to hit the basics, but for our purposes, right about in the middle is fine. Make sure that's tight, and make sure the controls are as free as possible. It's probably about 2 hours, 2.5 hours. We're cruising right along. I figured I'd just take a break, because of what I wanted to have. By the way, if you saw that bird just fly by, that's my house pet. That's Chickadoodle. Anyway, I wanted all the CA to be dry. I wanted to check the control system, and this is how I check it. I want to kind of work the lead outs, make sure the controls are free, and that I have pretty much the same amount or close to the same amount up and down. It looks like we do. Anything binding, anything sticking. Well, what's going to happen is as you fly this, they're just going to get freer and freer and freer and freer as time goes by. So the next step is going to be the tail. Now, putting the tail together is pretty much going to be a carbon copy of doing the wing. We're going to do the elevators, put the horn in place. I've already read the directions, so I'm kind of like the king of the ARFs here. I can take the hinges, get them ready. I'm very surprised how quickly this goes. This really does go quickly. I was afraid this might take up like a whole shop day. Not really. If you were to start this on a Saturday morning, you'd be flying that afternoon. Now, going by the instructions, I'm going to take the horn, but again, it's pretty much an exact copy of that, and I don't want to spend 20 minutes of the video repeating all the steps. Same thing with the hinges, same thing with the horn. A mirror image of it. Just make sure that the horn is on the inside. You don't put it backwards. It's the only thing I think you can do wrong. And the neat thing is once we get the tail in, and there's only about 6 other little parts to bolt on here, and we'll be ready to fly. Smarter, before we actually put the horn in place, I'm going to open up the hole because I know the plating in there has closed down the hole. Like a couple of thousandths anyway. Just make it easier once we get this all put together. Now, first thing is I got to get the horn into the elevators and get them kind of married up. make sure as I say, I don't want to get them backward. Actually, it's just excellent engineering every step of the way here that makes this practical. So, as per directions, first step is we want to center the horn, center it, and get the covering material off. We want to make sure we don't have this offset. What's really important here is also, before we cut this and before we glue it, we want to make sure the hinge line to hinge line is equal. But again, most of this is pretty similar to the wing. We're going to add another piece of 1/8 inch tape. Covering material, same as the wing. Put the horn in, you can see it's not exactly straight. Well, before we even glue it in, we want to make sure it's straight, get the tweak going. Sure, when you sight down the elevators that these are not exactly perfect, you can just give it a very gentle tweak until they line up. You want them to line up, and that's the flaps and the elevators both. That's a very significant thing to get right at this point. Don't wait till after the plane is built, because then you can't sight down. I found it easier to just glue one side of the hinges in before gluing the other side in. I'm sure there are some people that are going to want to replace these hinges with nylon hinges, but believe me, these work fine. And I would suggest, if you're going to use these, absolutely tape the hinge lines, and we'll go through that part toward the end when we're trimming the plane out. What I wanted to do is a dry fit everything together. See, the hinges are glued in this side but not in the other side, because we're going to basically put this in place. Now we know the dry fit, we know we have enough clearance around the horn. You may have to notch out a little bit of wood. We can pull this apart. Put the elevators in. Oh, we got to go from the other side. The elevators already have taken into account a little bit extra clearance. We know we have our basic alignment figured out. And now we basically can just get these hinges in. Before we glue the hinges in, we want to just double check that we're getting a snap. Oop, it was off a little bit. And that we're on center. And now we can just put one drop. Tack everything together first. Let the capillary action work its way in. Because before we make a permanent joint, we want to make sure that from the front we have the stab and elevators in alignment, that it isn't down, up, down, up. And once we get that established, then we can put a permanent glue joint there. Put in place, not permanent. I want to measure the hinge line to the hinge line, and you really want to spend time and get this right. It should be exactly the same. And now the reason for tack gluing it in place is if it's off a little bit, we can just hit that with a razor and move it again. Now, it looks like we're hinge line to hinge line, everything is fine. So what we're going to do is now run one side, only one side of the glue joint, not both sides, because then we want to do the front alignment. And if it's wrong, we can shim it on the bottom or on the top, depending on which side we didn't shim it on, which side we didn't glue it on. Let that glue kick off. Then we need to look from the front and see that everything's in good alignment. And that is another critical step if you want to have real nice performance. Now let that glue set up, and then we'll check the front view. If you were to look right from the front, you can see that the stab isn't parallel to the wing right now. We only have this side glued. See how one side is higher than the other? We want that to disappear behind the wing equally. Now see, that side is high, that side is low. So what we're going to do is make a shim before we make a permanent glue joint. That's why I don't make a permanent glue joint. Just tack it, get everything in alignment hinge line to hinge line, and then the last thing you can shim that. And I'll show how I make a little shim. Very important to have those two things in good alignment. And by the way, on one of the videos that we make a video strictly of trimming a Brodak Cardinal, all the flight trimming tricks. An excellent video to add to your video library, or to start a video library with if you don't have one. It's the trim video for the Brodak Cardinal. Oh, this is the low side, so we can make what amounts to be a little shim, because we only have one side glued on the top. Remember, if you glued this already in, too late to do this. So we can bend this side down, put a little stress under it, and shove a shim in there. Now if we needed 2 shims or 3 shims or 4 shims, it wouldn't matter. We need to know how many shims to put in there, and we could make this a little fancier, of course. Ordinary 64th plywood. Now if one shim doesn't do it, I'll stick a second, a third, or a fourth in there until that's shimmed and both sides are totally parallel, and that is a very important trim feature to get right. It takes so little time to build these that it really pays, in this case, it really pays to get the alignment parts of it right. Save yourself so much trim work at the field. In this case, it took 1/164th shim, and you can see the whole tail disappears. But you could always fine-tune that with a little sand to shim, or you could add 2 shims. But you really do want to have those 2 surfaces, the wing and the stab and elevators, parallel. And now that they are, we can put permanent glue joints in. The shim in place, hinge lines aligned, and all it's left to do is glue in the hinges. And needless to say, gluing the hinges in. Just wait till each side kicks off. We don't really concern ourselves with if it's a tight fit or not because of the hinge line tape. Just move them until that CA kicks off. That is a little guide. This is a pushrod guide hole here. We just need to get some of the covering material out of there. And the only soldering joint we're going to have to make on the whole plane is this one joint on the pushrod. Now, the easiest way I can see to do this is we have the pushrod pieces in this little adjuster, and we could kind of set it up ahead of time. Again, I'm going to take all the material off here, all the plating. Just make it easier for myself that way. Let's get this open. These are nice little keepers, by the way. Make sure that's got enough. Yep, that's got enough. Now in this case, it'll be the middle hole to the middle hole. The washer will go on next. This is all on the directions too, so that this is completely adjustable. And when we're done, we want this to be that it's just free floating. It isn't rubbing, it isn't bowing it out in any way. On the other side is going to go another nut and washer. And then it's going to be a simple case of getting the back push rod hooked up. This is totally adjustable now. That keeps the push rod from bowing on the load. Get rid of the plating and the burr. Plating is nice though because it'll keep the push rod from rusting for hopefully for forever. Hope you have the plane forever. Hope I have mine forever. A couple of things before soldering this link. This is a little sleeve and it allows this to go back and forth. Now, it has to be soldered. I would recommend nothing but Stay Bright silver solder. No plumbing solder, no hobby solder, Stay Bright silver solder. Now, I've taken off all the plating about 1 inch in each direction, and the plating also makes the sleeve a little bit too tight of a fit, so just sand with a nail file or with by hand or with a grindstone until you get a press fit. Now, what that allows you to do is get neutral on the flaps, get neutral on the elevators. Everything now is in neutral, and now we can solder that joint. Now, to use Stay Bright properly, everything has to be clean. You can clean it with alcohol. And when you're done, the flux agent for Stay Bright is sulfuric acid. And you want to just get the heat to flow the solder right into the tube. And the last step on the joint is bring the heat into the middle of the joint. And what that does, it lets the solder flow the whole length. Now, when these joints are done, that joint should be cleaned in baking soda and water to clean the acidic, the flux that leaves an acid base and will make that a problem. So the best thing is when it's cooled, let it cool by itself, clean it with some clean alcohol, and then clean it with the defluxing agent is spoonful of baking soda and a glass of water. And if you can't get Stay Bright locally, you can get it from me or from John Brodak, either one of us stock it. For all soldering needs, Stay Bright silver solder, even making fuel tanks. It melts at a lower melting temperature, so you don't tend to do a lot of damage to nylon parts, things like that. Now that's still warm. What I'm going to do, a little piece of sandpaper. So I want to make sure I have all of that flux off of there. And then I'll get my baking soda and water out. Now, if I ever want to adjust neutral, and that's one of the things we might want to do when we trim the plane, this gives us a trim feature. We can heat this solder joint and give it more elevator, less elevator. And by the way, the middle horn, middle hole, top hole, bell crank. Tell if you have a decent soldering joint, it'll always be shiny, even after it's defluxed. But that does give us a nice trim feature. Now, we want to make sure we don't have any friction here. I don't want this binding. I want that to be free. Sooner or later, oil is going to get on here, and that'll be no problem at all. But also, you want to make sure you have no issues with clearance, that there's no rubbing, binding anywhere in the system. Controls should be free, and anywhere that they're binding, just cut or sand the wood away. Now, in this case, you can see where we're going to have to make some clearance. See where that's hitting? Well, we're just going to take just enough material off of that, or we could bend the wire, but the wire's already in neutral. We'll just take a sanding block and take a little bit of that material out of there so that the controls are free, smooth, and they're ready to, once this is done, they're ready for the final control testing. A nail file, by the way, is a good way to do this. I want to get a little extra clearance in there. And when I'm done, of course, I'll seal this up with some thin CA, make sure that isn't hitting anything. We have the same amount of control up and down, roughly. Now, a good way to seal that is take a Q-tip, whoa, put the CA right on the Q-tip and just rub it in there. We don't want any exposed wood. Any wood that doesn't have either covering on it. In fact, I want to get the edge of that covering back down too. Just taking some lubricant. This is motorcycle chain oil, but you certainly could use 3-in-1 oil or anything. Any part of the control system that's moving, this will get oiled relatively quickly. Any of the pivot points, I want to be absolutely sure we have nice free controls. And this is one spot where, until it wears in and it gets good and lubricated, you don't want this putting stress on the push rod in any way. I always oil the lead outs. We want to have these controls as free as possible for our test flight. Before I go any further, I want to make sure there's nothing binding anywhere in this control system. If you really want to be a fanatic, you can hang it by the lead outs and drop some oil down into the bell crank. But we basically have a real nice control system here. That worked out very, very well. One of the last little things is to clean off the plating off the tail wheel wire. Where is that little, there's a notch in here somewhere. And there's a little cover, a little hatch. We'll epoxy that in. Epoxy the cover on. And takes care of the tail wheel. Imagine we're just closing in on it now. Not much left to do. That's where it really starts to get fun. Trim this bolt off because I don't want to have an edge here that's a razor blade. As you're wiping a plane off or launching it, I'll cut that with a Dremel tool parting wheel and just put a drop of CA on it. Now the next step is to mount up the landing gear. So the next thing we're going to do, and since the plane is in one piece and all the controls are in place and everything, what's handy to have, this is a piece of an old bed pad, foam rubber to lay the airplane on, or in this case this is a piece of foam rubber that's a cushion or from a computer or from a printer, I'm not sure. It's just ordinary foam with a towel on it. And it's easy when you work on it, when you're working on your airplane, to just have something like this. And in this case, what we want to do, I want to turn it over very conveniently. And I don't want to lay it on a flat glass table. I lay it on kind of a padded area, some kind of a sponge, an old pillow, an old couch foam or whatever. And that's very handy to take to the field also if you need to do some work on the bottom of the model. Next step is going to be to clean out the holes for the landing gear mount and bolt in the landing gear. The bolts provided, and make sure they're good and tight. They have aircraft locking nuts that go on the other side. And it's a good idea after the first 3 or 4 times you fly the airplane to retighten the bolts, because bolts that are going through any kind of wood, hardwood, plywood, after a certain amount of time they take a set and they need to be retightened. But then after that they'll usually stay at that setting for quite a while. Same thing with propellers. Prop should be tightened when it's new if you're using a wood prop or any prop, and check it every few flights. In this case I'm taking an equal amount of pressure on each bolt. I want this to seat nice and tight and nice and straight. Next step is to cut the covering. Take out the tip weight box cover. It's recommended to start with about an ounce of tip weight. You can either purchase, or almost everybody that flies model airplanes has lead weights. But what I'm suggesting, if you're a beginner or you haven't flown in a long time, put 1.5 ounces in. A little extra tip weight is never going to hurt anything if you're new or if you're just getting back into it. If you're an experienced, seasoned flyer, you probably can get away with a little bit less, but I would suggest for beginners, put a little bit extra in. 1/4 ounce weights that you can purchase separately from either from John Brodak or from myself. And the trick is I always drill this hole out or just take a knife and open it up a little bit. It just makes lining up the bolt a little easier, and as per the directions, once we get the pieces installed, we need to then get the bolt back in the middle. Another way you can do this is with, if you fill a box with clay, but the lead weights are a lot better, I think. Once we get these in here, then it's important that we either put a little piece of wood or a little piece of paper towel, because we don't want these rattling around. We want the cover to actually press down on the weight and hold it in place. That's important. You can just stuff some paper towel in there. Make sure you have everything lined up so the bolt, the threads can get started, and it's just a question of tightening the bolt. Make sure this hatch goes on the right way, in which case we don't have it on the right way. It's got to go this way. It's a good idea to check this little hatch cover bolt from time to time. Or in the case of, once you get the tip weight where you're pretty happy with it, you can just put a little piece of Scotch tape over this as a safety feature. Now I'm going to, as a little safety feature of my own, put some Scotch tape over this for a simple reason is where we fly, a lot of times there'll be 8, 10, 15 airplanes at the field at one time. And the problem is if this tip weight box or a piece of this lead comes out, it can not only hurt somebody, but hurt another plane, or hurt one of the spectators. So that's just a little safety redundancy. And as long as I have the tape out, I'm going to show how I tape hinge lines. This is the tape I use. It's available in Staples, or you can buy it from me or from John Brodak. We all sell it. It's a generic tape. It's not expensive, but it's important to know, as long as we're going to do tape things, let's tape the hinge lines right now. I happen to have a helper in the shop, which is real handy. You can just have them hold the controls full down. If, like myself, you work alone a lot, now you don't want to bend the elevators, but I want to have them at full deflection. I can just stick a piece of paper towel in there. Now see, that's held at what amounts to be the full deflection. I want these down as far as possible. I take out a piece of tape, take it much longer than it has to be, because now your fingerprints will be off of where it'll be. Lay it so it's half on each hinge line. If you get it wrong, just use a little bit of a heat gun, a hair dryer. Let me pick this up. Very, very important thing to have the hinge lines taped if you're looking to make the maximum performance from the effort that you're putting into this. And in my case, I actually plan on competing in some contests with this plane, so I'm not going to compromise it. Now when you take this out, the controls may be squeaky, but it doesn't in any way keep them from moving. If it's limiting the deflection that you have, then it's a problem. Heat the tape, peel it off, and do it again. Now in our case, we'll do the other elevator and the flaps off camera. But that's a taped, sealed hinge line, and that's exactly what virtually all the planes that I've built in the last 15, 20 years, taped hinge lines. Very important part. Getting a plane to fly at its maximum potential. The tail wheel with the wheel collar provided. Following the directions that are in the kit, I'm marking where I'm going to be drilling my hole. I'm going to go over to the drill press. If you don't have a drill press, you want to drill this very carefully to attach the wheel pants. Now one thing about the wheel pants, if you're not going to be flying off concrete all the time, if you're going to fly off grass, you might want to leave the wheel pants off and wait until you're going to be flying off a paved surface. Or be very careful not to damage the wheel pants when you're flying on grass. Sometimes they'll catch and cause a problem, but on on a paved surface, never a problem. And of course it's always good if the way these are located, you can take them off for flying on grass or leave them on, or you can have them on pavement or leave them off. But they are removable. They have a little reinforcement inside. They're beautifully made composite wheel pants. What I'm going to do, the method John shows for mounting the wheel pants on the directions is one way of doing it, and I thought you could use that way, but I'm going to show an alternative way that I've used over the years with some pretty good success. The screw they provide with the kit, the only thing you need to replace is one of the castellated lock nuts with a blind nut. Now the first thing you need to do is the side of the wheel pant that has the plywood in. Just insert the blind nut. That's step one. Sometimes you can just squeeze it in by hand, or if the hole is a little on the loose side, whoop, the hole is on the loose side. If the hole is on the tight side, you could press it in with a pair of pliers. The next step, now that we have the blind nut in there, you really don't even have to glue it. Again, I want to be able to take the wheel pants on and off depending on the field that I'm going to fly in, or the situation. For instance, if I'm training somebody who's real new to this, might not want the wheel pants on there. First step on this is to set the clearance, and again, you just want to have enough play in the wheel side to side, because this play now is not going to change. By tightening it, I can tighten this. Over tightening this side is going to make the wheel rub or have friction, but right now what I want to have, because I have the blind nut inside, I want to have a free spinning wheel. Now from this point on, I just hold the bolt with the wrench. I don't tighten it. If you tighten this, you squeeze the wheel. This is the way that you make this work. From this point on, you thread the castellated lock nut on, holding this in place and just tightening the nut. Now once I put this on here, this is what I don't want to have. I don't want to have these pointing up or pointing down, so I have to look from the side, or lay the, as the directions show, lay the plane up on a workbench. I'd like to have these as parallel to the fuselage as possible, and I'm just going to run that castellated nut on here while I'm holding the bolt in place. I do not want to tighten the bolt now. I want to do all the tightening from the nut side. Do is with this side of the wrench, I don't want the bolt to turn, and I can make this as tight or as loose as I want, because this is just sandwiching between the blind nut. And once that's tight, now these won't move. I can set these, they're just loose enough that I can set them into the position where they're parallel to the fuselage. Then I need to mark the two little holes, put the two little wood screws in. Now, if I want to adjust the clearance on the wheel, if the wheel got too tight, I back this out. If the wheel gets too loose, I can tighten this, but I don't change the relationship between the blind nut and this, which is doing the squeezing right at that point. And that's the secret of this way of doing it. And once these are parallel, I have them nice and straight, I'm happy with it. I can just put a little starter hole for the two little wood screws using a small screwdriver and the screws that are supplied. This keeps the wheel pants from rotating. And now all it's left to do, make sure this is tightened as tight as you want it to be. And what I'm going to do is put one drop of CA on each one of these screws just to avoid them getting loosened. Maybe a drop of oil on each wheel. The wheel pants are installed, and by the way, we sell these wheel pants separately. If you'd like to put these on other models, they're available right on my website, and they're available from John Brodak also, of course. Having them parallel to the ground so that the landings either on concrete or on grass are going to be nice and smooth. Now the last thing we have to do is mount the motor and the fuel tank of your choice. Bob Zambelli, who did an awful lot, if not most, of the development work on the original ARFs. Graciously loaned us his Brodak 40. Mine is in another plane, and I didn't want to disrupt taking it all apart. But I wanted to show that this is one of the engines that's a suitable choice. It's definitely one that you'd use. One of the engines I do have available is a used engine of mine. And what I decided to do, I didn't want to use a brand new engine, because our intention is to let as many people as possible fly this plane under as many conditions as possible, get the most use out of it. And I do have a used engine, a Magjet, that's available from Richard Oliver, and that's the one I'm going to put in there for the test flights. The motors that Rich Oliver sells, and I have used them for the last 2 years in my Bomber. I'm retrofitting the Bomber now with 40s because the rules have changed for next year, so I have these engines available. And because I want to make these available to as many people as possible, I want people not only to test the plane, but get a feel for these new motors that are available. Now, I also like a couple of things that Rich Oliver makes. They make great mufflers, tongue mufflers and tube mufflers. You can buy mufflers that Big Art manufactures from Brodak or from myself. The fuel filter that Rich makes, the Rojet fuel filter, is, I think, one of the best and one I've used with good reliability the last couple of years. Something you want to have if you're not familiar with fuel filters, get a couple of fuel filters from Rich Oliver. They are one of the finest available. Is all the information pertinent to Rojet engines, Rich Oliver. And by the way, in the Brodak catalog, you're going to find, you want to have a Brodak catalog, there's literally hundreds of items you'll want to have if you're making a return to our event, or if you just want to have a good source of products. Rich makes some unique products. He has a website, and he's always available for technical help on the phone. Now, this ship features a unique clamp mounting system where you don't have to drill the motor mounts out and try to line up the motor bolts or anything. It's actually a clamping system. You need to take the covering away from these areas. These plates that are provided with the ARF actually clamp the motor in place, and the only thing you have to worry is that you don't get the motor in crooked pointing up or pointing down. Just decide it. Make sure it's as level as you possibly can make it. And by the way, one of the things that this allows you to do, and we're going to be doing on a regular basis, you notice that bird had to get in the video. Get out of there! That's Chickadoodle. Now anyway, as I was so rudely interrupted by a bird, what this is going to allow you to do is, let's say you have 3, 4, 5 different motors. Well, you can replace them right at the field. It's not a big deal, as opposed to the old way where you had to take a Dremel tool and Dremel out all the bolts and butcher up expensive pieces of equipment. Well, now with this system, you're actually using this just like a vise to clamp the motor in place. It allows you to move it slightly forward or back. And again, like with any bolts that's set into wood, at some point in time, a couple of runs into it, just check the bolts regularly. Do is using my Dremel tool, I had to take a little bit of material off the front of the front bolt to get it to line up just right. And I think that was because I put some glue that dripped down in there and I just don't have exactly the right clearance. But you can open up those holes just a little bit if you have to. Because in essence what you have here is 2 vices. And the vices are going to hold the motor. Now we know we have the bolts fit. I have a little bit of clearance on each one of these holes. We can put the motor of our choice in there. We can change it instantly at the field or in the shop. And just tighten the screws on a regular basis as you would with any aeroplane. For our original tests, I have a really nice lightweight muffler that for the Magjets that I wanted to try, and we have used this before. It's made by Scott Dinger. And it just happens to fit the Magjet real nice. But all these are just personal taste items, whether you want a tongue muffler, tube muffler. We're going to be using a Rojet glow plug. And I want to get a brand new air filter on the engine. I would never want to run one of these engines, or any engine really, without an air filter, without a fuel filter, and without some kind of a muffler. Hey, speaking of mufflers, get out of here! And we also have this is an old spinner that we have. The reason I've chosen it, it's relatively light. They don't make these anymore. They come from the Ukraine. And a Brian Ether 10 by 5 3-bladed prop. These are available. Scott Dinger muffler, Rojet plug, Magjet. All we have to do is figure out which gas tank we want to use, get a gas tank in place, and this project comes to a very, very enjoyable conclusion. Sources of tanks available. Brodak makes an excellent tank. I prefer the one with all the tubes forward. And the mounting system of your choice. Now, Brodak makes some excellent brackets that make for an adjustable tank. But because we're going to be doing a lot of engine testing, we want to be able to replace the tank, move it, and shim it. I'm going to use the old tried and true method that I've used for years of attaching it with 2 straps. Final step of the model. But now there are some other important issues that I think will be really worth dealing with right now. So what I did, I just put some ordinary electrical tape. You could also use covering material over the holes where the blind nuts were. The reason I chose this method of just having a strap on a tank, it's one of many good methods, but because we want to be able to replace the tank and shift the tank up and down as we're testing various motors in this design. This is going to be a multi-use airplane in my Air Force. And these are what I call commonly asked questions. Things that as we were developing this, the ARF series of planes, and I'd touch base with people, I'd ask them, what would be the information that you'd like to see on an ARF video? So these are some of the questions and the answers that I think would help most of the people most of the time. Now, I think the most common problem that either new people or people returning seem to have an issue with is balancing the model. And here's what typically happens. This aircraft is designed for a typical modern motor using typical props that we all use and typical gas tanks. And what happens when you deviate from the original plan, you can vary this range, and this is the range where this is too detailed of a topic to go into now, but it's covered in detail on many of our other trim videos. 15 to 20% of the mean average core to wing. Anywhere in this range, if you balance the model, and given the fact you haven't changed anything, this model should very comfortably be in this range. Now, what'll change that range if you, for instance, use a very heavy engine? Let's say you use an engine that's more than 9 ounces, and or a big giant heavy muffler, and or a big heavy giant spinner. Well, what you can do is add 2 ounces here, you can add about 1 ounce here, and this was not designed into the original model. The original model was made to use a roughly 8-ounce engine, a 4-ounce gas tank, either a tongue muffler or a lightweight muffler, and a light spinner. So what happens then, you may get this to where it's so nose heavy that it won't be responsive. What you need to do then, if you're going to use all that hardware, is to get some plumber's solder and add some solder to the tail wheel, or else drill a small hole in the back of the fuselage and mount up some trim weights. But you always want to be in the 15 to 20% range of balance. That's where, and I would guess, new people would be real comfortable at about 15. People that are advanced or expert level flyers, 20, and maybe some super experts would even go further back than 20. But that's a good starting point, and the model, as you've built it and trimmed it, it should be very close to that right off the bat. Again, the only things that can really change it are a much heavier motor, a much heavier muffler, the mufflers that generally come with engines, or a real heavy spinner and or a real heavy prop. You see, all this weight then pulls that center of gravity forward. So if you know that ahead of time, the plane is sluggish, you know it's relatively going to be nose heavy. And that's probably the most commonly asked question. Now for this model, 3 distinct questions, and these are very common questions, and there's always a good answer. The lines that you'll want to use, if the motor that you've chosen is up to 40 displacement, will be 015s. We're going to eliminate solids out of this right now. 015 braided lines. If you have anything from a 40, and the most common would be a 46 or up, you're going to need 018s to be AMA legal. So the break-off point is a 40. Anything up to a 40, 015s, over a 40, 018s. Now the type of handle I recommend and I always use is the kind I sell. This is very similar to an old Easy Just hot rock handle. The arm length is short. The kind of handle you'd like to avoid, unless there's a compelling reason, is a handle with long arms. And I personally don't like handles that have a bar, because when I get them adjusted this short, the bar winds up hitting my knuckles. Again, this would be my first choice. If I had a handle with longer arms, the model is going to be a lot less responsive. And you can change the setting on the handle. The wider you make the cables, the more sensitive the model is. The closer the cables come together, the less sensitive it'll be. And the most important question is the length. Now, the length of the lines, because this is where a lot of people have they buy a set of 60-foot lines and they think, oh, I'm flying on 60-foot lines. What we want to do is measure the middle of the handle to the middle of the handle to the middle of the fuselage, and we'd like that to be, to start with, I would always want to start with 60 feet from the middle of the handle to the middle of the fuselage. Now, some motors, if you're using a 46, an LA 46, you might go to 62 feet. Well, yeah, but for starting and for getting back into the event, and for just to make it that it's absolutely foolproof, lines that are a little too short never get you in trouble. If they're a little too long and you have a rich run or the wind is blowing, this can get you in trouble. 60-foot lines, a very, very safe choice for this model and this design. Again, they would be 015s up to a 40, 018s up to a 46. Always a question people want to know. We'd like the model to run the same speed when it's flying upright as when we're flying it upside down. The way to figure that out is I would always start with the center line of the tank, somewhere about 1/8 of an inch higher than the center line of the motor when you sight down it. In other words, I'd like the tank to be, when it's sitting on its feet near the wheel pan, so we're looking from the pilot's point of view through the model, we'd like the average point of the tank to be just about, a starting point would be 1/8 inch higher. Now, each time you're going to have to make an adjustment on this until it runs the same upright and inverted. Now let's make an example up. If it's running too fast in level flight, just as an example, and you turn it upside down and it runs slow, you're going to want to shim the tank. You're going to want to get it, the higher you make this tank, let's exaggerate up here, that motor's going to get richer. As you lower the tank, it's going to get leaner. Raise it, it gets richer, the same way any hydraulic system works, a liquid system. Lower it, it gets leaner. So in an ideal world, we'd like to start about 1/8 of an inch off center. It's probably going to go up or down depending on your personal choice, your engine, but that's a good way to start. That would be the starting point that I picked. Now, because we're almost ready to fly our model, if you haven't flown control line in a long time, or if you're new, you want to take off the model, you want to practice starting the engine. And I like to be, it's my own personal choice, not everybody feels this way, of course, I like to be with the wind directly at my back and maybe 2 or 3 feet up this way so the model is airborne and it's still downwind. Now that ensures that if you were up here, sometimes the wind will be a factor, sometimes it won't, but the The wind can blow the model in and have a loss of tension or catch on some grass. If you're flying over grass, the lines can catch. I think you're safest, especially when you're a new pilot, to be dead downwind for a takeoff. Also, when you start doing your first loops, I'd like to be downwind. When you're going to practice your first level of inverted flight, and let's assume you haven't flown inverted in a lot of years, you might want to consider coming around. If you're going to do a lazy 8, but I'd always want the wind to be at my back. Then as I got more and more comfortable, expert level flyers, some bias the maneuvers into the wind and out of the wind, and it gets very technical. And again, we do have a video that explains all that in great detail, but it's a little too involved for our discussion right now. We're just trying to hit the most common questions that is going to help the most people. Here's another very, very common question. Somebody's been away or they've flown other events for many years. Where can I get blank? Item of your choice. Well, my personal feeling is the biggest single tool you'll want to have is a Brodak catalog. Brodak catalog, and I won't go through this much right now, because you'll get your own. Hundreds, probably thousands items that you'll want. You'll want to look at it over and over again. And you'll want to get a new one when the new one comes out, because the new ones always have a lot of new products, a lot of new things that are just coming out on the market. Again, this is an investment in your modeling enjoyment. One of the things it shows you is the control line aerobatic pattern, the old-time stunt pattern. Again, this is made to make it as easy as possible. You can also purchase direct from Brodak's some of my videos, and I won't bother hitting the highlights here, but there's virtually nothing, no question that you would be able to ask that I would not have some reference to on one of my videos. So if a good idea is to start a video library and take advantage of the fact that in the modern sport that we're in, everything is not only available, it's doable, and it's very easy and enjoyable. It's unlike years gone by when things were very, very secretive, maybe difficult or impossible to get. Everything is at your fingertips. Everything is either in the Brodak catalog, out on the internet, and if you can find something that's not there, call me up and let's see if we can find it. Now, if you're calling me for help, for information, technical help is always available, always free. My shop hours are generally 1 to 5, and sometimes I'm in the shop till 6. My email address, windyu@aol.com, and I do email twice a day. And my shop phone number, 201-896-8740. And the website is windyartnowski.com. So that should be able to get you information to find anything. Even some of the old nostalgic things. A lot of the stuff is still around. You just have to know where to look for it. And both John and I will do everything we can to get you to things that'll make being part of our sport as enjoyable as it possibly can be. Now, we live in a wonderful time. There are so many good motor choices available. The list could go on. It could take up a whole video. But no matter which motor you feel like you enjoy the most, break it in. Every motor comes with the manufacturer's recommendation. Break it in. Don't just put it in a plane and run out and fly it. I would try to use the best quality fuel I could find, and one of the tip-offs would be it has a minimum of 20% oil, usually half castor, half synthetic, but use a good quality fuel. Don't buy fuel because it's a gallon cheaper, because usually in that case they leave out some of the ingredients like oil that are very expensive. Almost everybody that has a problem with an engine or they're unhappy for some reason, you can trace it back to the manufacturer recommends props. Use what they recommend. If they recommend a 10.6, a 10.5, an 11.6, an 11.4, whatever they recommend, that's a good starting point. And then experiment on your own. But always check what the manufacturer recommends first. Try not to get any over-lean settings on your motor. It's usually over-lean settings that ruin a motor, burn out glow plugs, or contribute to a crash. Use air filters, use fuel filters, and be sure to filter your fuel. I have 2 filters on the jug. As I'm pumping the fuel into the model, there are 2 filters. Then from the tank to the engine there's another filter, so the odds of things getting to my engine and needle valve setting and causing an over-lean run are hopefully very remote. However, it's a good idea and good periodic maintenance, especially with a brand new tank, to clean this filter at the end of every fly-in session. Just back flush it, put fuel in backwards. And these filters, from time to time, back flush them, clean them. Clean air, clean fuel is going to make for your enjoyment and the long life of the engine all at the same time. Now, one of the most important things too, always remember to get the handle in neutral. When your hand is straight up and down, that your flaps and elevators are neutral. If the handle is, we call it bias, if it's biased up or down, it's going to be difficult and confusing to do any maneuvers, and definitely not a good way to fly. Try to get comfortable that when this handle is in neutral, almost all handles have an adjustment at the back to a screw that you loosen up and you move the cable through. Have somebody hold the model and determine when everything is dead level. Hold your handle there and get the cable set so flaps, elevators, handle are all neutral at the same time, and you'll have the best chance possible of having success even on your first flight. And I hope that you've gotten some good information, that you've enjoyed building your ARF, and that you'll enjoy flying it even more. We've enjoyed the Cardinal series since basically going back to 1987. Every one of them has been a new and enjoyable part of our modeling career. And I think the Brodak Cardinal is certainly one of the best planes, one of the best designs, certainly of right now and maybe of all time. Now the last thing we have to do before we can get out and fly this guy, put 4 or 5 drops of dish detergent in some water. Now don't do what I did the first time I ever used Brodak decals. I thought they were the kind where you put the whole decal in water. You don't. You only use this water to wet the surface where the press-on is going to go. These are dry press-ons. Read the directions carefully, and guess what? I didn't. And the first set of decals didn't come out the way they should. You only use the water to wet the wing. A couple of drops of soap. It's in the directions, but don't skip over it. Don't see the word decal and then think, dip it in the water. You'll be disappointed. Probably best, we'll start with one of the smaller ones, like the piece that goes on the rudder. Cut it out with a pair of scissors or a sharp razor. Do a small one first. That's probably the easiest way to do it. And these are nice, I call them dry transfers, but I don't know what the right word is. Maybe they really do call them decals. But you can be fooled very easily into thinking this gets dunked in the water. And just remember, I did it too, so don't feel bad. And when I called John about it, he had a good laugh, so it's in the directions. Well, the idea of the soapy water is so if you put it on crooked, you can get it off and move it. Now, I'll just show this real quick. You can cut it out so you don't get a lot of the clear sticking out, and a razor or a knife, of course, is fine. If you did it dry and it went on wrong, you really wouldn't get a chance to do it over. Kind of like in New Jersey, the inspection stickers on the cars. Let's see how this looks here, because if we don't like it, we can move it. Now, this is a squeegee, but you can use the top of a margarine jar or anything just to squeegee out the water once you're happy with where it is. We also put on some jet stickers that Rich Oliver sent us. Anything you can do, you can use striping tape to decorate the model. You can you can pretty much have a free hand. And when you're going over the rib bays, it's even more important to get plenty of the soapy water in place so it doesn't stick where you don't want it to be. So I guess if you build your own ARF, and the worst thing you have like me is that you don't read the directions correctly for the decals. You know what I love about being old is how you can't ever get, you go somewhere without your glasses, you may as well go home. I'm trying to do this because I want to get a nice, neat edge on the application. Here we go. I wanted to show just how nice this goes on. You don't want it running up and sticking on itself either. And what you want to do is start in the middle and work to the ends. And all the water that comes out just allows that final placement to be really nice. And I remember myself when John was developing the decals that go in all the Brodak kits, I should call them dry transfers. This is a significant part of developing a nice product. And of course you can just take a paper towel, and you can take some, if you have some striping tape or some other little stickers or whatever you want to decorate. As soon as we get the rest of the decals put on here, one of the things, we want to bench run it before we fly it. We want to go cut a set of lines exactly 60 feet. I want to get an air filter. I don't have an air filter yet. I always try to make a little checklist of what I need to do because I hate to get to the flying field and say you don't have one of the things you need. You don't have a set of lines, you don't have a handle, you don't have a fuel filter, an air filter, something. I like to get that all done ahead of time so that when we get out to the field, and it's kind of rainy today, so we probably won't fly today, but when we do get out there, we really want to have everything we need to get this in the air for the first flight. Oh, this one comes up easy. As I say that, it goes back down. And right about this point in time, we really start to get excited about giving this the old test flight. The experience of building it has been as advertised, very quick, very accurate. The few little things you want to keep in mind is take the plating off the pushrod coupler and the holes in the horns. Other than that, everything is a drop-in. Mount the tank in the method of your choice. Again, I like the strap method because I want to be able to replace that tank should it have a problem at the field. I always have a spare tank, and I want to test some of the tanks I manufacture, the high-end carbon fiber tanks. So this will allow me, the strapping system will allow me to do that. The Brodak, the little tabs that the Brodak tanks come with, or you can order as an accessory, I should say, they're excellent. This is one sweet little plane to build, and it's a nice plane to have in your Air Force. And when it's done, you can just look at it and say, what, had I built the kit, or had I built it from scratch, like I built the original one, you'd be looking at maybe 100, 150 hours. A kit, maybe 75 hours, 50 hours. This, I think, reasonably, and without any compromise, especially if you have a helper. If two guys can get together on Saturday morning, Saturday night you can fly the plane. Saturday evening you'll be putting in a test flight. Now after installing I think these are Prather, they're Brewline, I'm sorry, a Brewline air filter, we're pretty much ready to go. But again, I would always, and I can't emphasize this enough, I would always bench run it. Bench running being This is going to get run on the ground before we ever even hook lines to it. Run 1 or 2 or 3 tanks of fuel. Then clean the fuel filter. Because if there's anything in a tank, especially a brand new tank, we don't want to pick it up halfway through a run, have a dead lean run, and maybe or maybe not damage the engine. It's a good idea then at the end of that 2 or 3 runs, and run it the way you would run it in the air. Tighten all of the screws, tighten the muffler screws, check that the prop is tight, especially if it's a wood prop. A carbon prop is a little bit less prone to coming loose, but we don't want to have anything come loose. Check the little wheel pant screws, and I would say from that point on it's ready to fly. Again, the biggest things that can hurt you on a new plane, a new flight, a new plane, to have the motor not broken in, to have the fuel filter clog up, to not have a spare glow plug in your toolbox when you get to the field. And we've been using Rojet glow plugs with good success, either Rojet or Thunderbolt. Try not to get a lean run on the first couple of runs. Let the motor seat in. Check the little screws that hold the wheel pants on. Other than that, pretty cut and dry. We're always happy to add a new plane to what I call our Air Force, the planes that we keep in the shop and in our Spitfire bedroom. And in this case, we try to have some of everything. We even have some twin-engine bombers. And might I suggest for one final time, if there's any part of this, any part of building, finishing, construction, paintwork, propellers, glow plugs, engines, tanks, and you think you can benefit from one of my videos, don't hesitate to contact me. Those videos are made so that the sport of model aviation can stay alive and well, and I think John Brodak has added a major piece to that puzzle by having ARFs. I see one person here who totally approves, Mr. Cardinal. These ARFs have been a long time coming, and I truly feel they're going to add a wonderful new dimension to the sport that we all seem to enjoy so much. Whether you enjoy high-end building, competition, old-time stunt, whatever part of this you enjoy, this is going to make it even more enjoyable and keep it alive for many, many years to come. Now it's time to leave the shop and get out to the flying field. I hope you've really enjoyed this part of it. Don't forget, we do have very, very detailed videos on engines, tanks, motor runs, propellers. And what we want to do is, before the video ends, before this tape ends, we want to get at least one flight on video. Now that's typically one of the steps most people don't want to go through, is running it on the ground. Now what I'm going to do is get the toolkit out, tighten all the screws, check the filter, make sure everything is as tight and just the way we want it before we try to fly it. I can't tell you how many times we've come to the field with a brand new plane, and one of the things that everybody's in a rush to fly it, including myself, of course. And what happens is you take off, something comes out of a brand new tank, the motor goes dead lean, and you can actually hurt a motor by doing that. So it's a good idea to check everything. If anything, have the first runs a little on the rich side. All of the bolts tend to seat. In fact, I'm going to have to take the muffler off to get to the bottom bolts here. I see that, but this is all the little maintenance that's worth doing. Now I can get in the back here. I'll let it cool off, and we're pretty much ready to get a flight on it. We don't have a particularly nice day, but I'm really itching to fly this. And if you haven't flown in a long time, it might be a good idea to wait for that really nice day. One of the most important things, and I've emphasized it already, is I have to take and get my handle at neutral when everything is in neutral. And by the way, if you haven't flown in a long time, this might, before you fly, you might want to check out all the trim videos that are available. There's so many good videos that help you with every step of the way. A tip that's worth its weight in gold: have a bottle of, this is 91% isopropyl alcohol, and a paper towel to wipe the lines between flights, no matter if they're solid lines or braided lines, and you'll see they constantly get dirty. The dirt makes them not as smooth as they would be if you didn't clean them. Very inexpensive maintenance. You buy it at any CVS. One bottle will last a half a season. The lines after every flight or two, and if I'm in the pits waiting for the next person to fly, even give them an extra wipe. Never hurts to have lines clean. Now we want to make sure we have the handle in neutral when our controls are in neutral. Very important. And we'll be ready for our first flight. Two important things: always mark the top of the handle or some way. And in my case, these are the handles I sell. They're identified by the top being painted, the bottom being a strap. It's a safety strap, and I would always suggest, even if you're flying by yourself, fly with a safety strap around your wrist. Make sure neutral is right where you want it. In our case, we're using a Mike Kajeski stooge, but Brodak sells an excellent stooge also. Now, I spent the better part of this day flying the Cardinal, coming up with a lot of trim, little changes, little features that I'm going to include on a subscriber video. We're also going to do an ARC video. That'll be coming up. In fact, we'll include that footage on the subscriber tapes. I did a couple loops, took it inverted, and I'll put all the trim information on that trim video. It seemed like it was a little nose heavy with the metal spinner. We might need a lighter or a plastic spinner, and maybe a wood prop instead of the carbon prop. Other than that, it trimmed right out, and it was very, very easy to fly, even under the conditions that were not that good where we were. I really hope you've enjoyed the presentation, and if there's any way we can ever help, needless to say, call, email, write. The purpose of this video is to give you the best chance possible to enjoy your Cardinal or other Brodak ARF, or ARF period. And we really hope you'll take advantage of some of the other great videos that are available. And thanks a lot for joining us.